Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to see everyone putting in the chat button where you're zooming from. We're going to get started. We wanted to say thank you so much for joining us today. I also want to make sure that on behalf of the entire Be the Change team and our sponsors and exhibitors, we want to acknowledge everyone in the safe space, and also for those that have been deeply affected by COVID and the losses that we've had from our family and friends. It has been a tough time for all of us. And please know that you have a community here to support you. And that's the most important thing that we want to share today, is that you have a community that we can have an open discussion about diversity, equity, and inclusion. We also want to let everyone know that we have an American Sign Language interpreter, Laura Brown, whom we are very thankful for providing us today with her time. Thank you, Laura, for being here. As we begin our roundtable discussion, we want to make sure that everyone understands what Be the Change is. Be the Change is a joint initiative with Diversity Wine and Spirits and Wonder Woman of Wine. We are committed to changing the status quo through action and policy, and this initiative seeks to establish a diverse wine industry through connecting jobs with companies that are dedicated to creating tangible solutions to build a better future for our industry. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce my fellow co-founders, Leah Jones, Executive Director and Founder, Diversity in Wine and Spirits, Rania Zayat, Founder and President of Wonder Woman of Wine, and Kara Bertone, National Account Sales Manager, Folio Fine Wine Partners. We would also like to thank our generous corporate sponsors for their continued support, Brazen and its Opportunity Fund. I see Joe Matar there, so thank you so much for being here. Force Brands and Colangelo and Partners. A few housekeeping notes. This webinar is being recorded and is scheduled to last about an hour. Although there is time we may go over, and we also want to hear from you. This is an interactive roundtable discussion. If you have questions, please submit them in the chat text box at the bottom of your screen, and all the registrants will be muted, and we'll be answering them during the Q&A section of after our discussion. This webinar recording will be emailed out to all registrants as well as posted on our website. And this is a safe, respectful, and courteous environment. We ask that all comments be relevant to this discussion. We are extremely excited to announce the wine industry's first virtual job fair that is focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We are making change here. We are going to begin by having a very frank and candid discussion about what diversity, equity, inclusion means to our fellow leaders, and what are the few things they're doing to lead this important discussion with their own companies, within their community, and themselves. And you will hear from leaders across different sectors of our businesses that make up the wine world, from wine production, restaurateur, marketing, and education. These leaders are committed to not only doing the work, but also dedicated to building a future for the next generation. And we hope this event helps facilitate and expedite change in our industry. Introducing our panelists, Susana Balbo, mother, first Argentinian female winemaker, entrepreneur, a former congresswoman for her country, chair of the W20 Women's 20, a working group of the G20 summit dedicated to women's empowerment, an influential wine producer, winemaker, and most importantly, a leader, a woman who continues to break barriers at every level. Bobby Stuckey, co-founder, Frasca Food and Wine, Pizzeria Locale, Scarpetta Wine Company. Bobby is also a fierce advocate and supporter of the Independent Restaurant Coalition. And in the past 16 years, Frasca Food and Wine, based in Boulder, Colorado, has become the epicenter of great wine service. Bobby has helped shape America's professional wine culture. Stephanie Gallo, Chief Marketing Officer at E&J Gallo Winery and Company. Gallo is the largest family-owned winery in the world, exporting wine and spirits in over 110 countries. In her role, Stephanie oversees consumer and product insights, digital marketing, experience marketing, media and public relations, as well as global management of all Gallo brands, creative development, and agency management. And Dr. Hoby Wedler. Blind since birth, Dr. Hoby Wedler is a scientist, sensory expert, and is driven by his passion for innovative, creative, and insightful thinking. And he also has a wonderful sense of humor. In 2011, he founded Accessible Science, a nonprofit organization which leads annual chemistry camps for blind or visually impaired students. He began opening doors in the world of wine aromas by holding true blind tastings, and now conducts a wide variety of sensory experiences around the world. So we're going to get started here. Susana, I'd like to start with
Yes.
the first question. What has diversity, equity, inclusion meant for you throughout your career?
Okay, it's a great question. Um, for me, to be the first in something and somehow is to be an entrepreneur. You know, to be an entrepreneur demands three requirements. First, to have knowledge in the field you want to work. I graduated as an enologist, summa cum laude. So I wanted to be the best in enologist, the best as a winemaker. So I did the best studies I was able to do. Second, you need to trust in yourself. You trust in yourself when you have confidence, and confidence comes from the knowledge and the environment you can create around you. And third, you need to have a very clear goal to achieve. When you have your clear goal, you know what you want to work on, and you have the knowledge and you have the passion to carry on a dream. Surely, the circumstances are going to align to uh, to have you successful, to become successful. Um, it's very important to not to let yourself to overcome by difficulties. Difficulties, as we talked earlier, Philana, difficulties are a new starting point for me and in the world. And when you have difficulties, you need to think it's not a failure. Failure doesn't exist for me. Only exists goal and bad experience, good and bad experience. And that is the right attitude, and not to let yourself to be defeated. So coming back to your question, it's very, very important to set a high standard in what you want to achieve and to follow your dreams in order to be able to change the inequity or to change what you want to change in your country or in your field.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Susana. And, you know, with coming with just what you said, you know, I want to bring it over to Hoby because being blind, you know, you truly, you know, are doing so many things to help push diversity, equity, inclusion. What has it meant for you throughout your career, especially as someone that has had a disability as far as being with your blindness?
Well, Philana, thank you very much for the question. And I just want to take one step back and say a huge thanks to everybody in Be the Change. And you know what a great movement this is, and what a timely and important opportunity. And I just feel very grateful to be a part of this group. It's a great question about diversity and inclusion, diversity, equity, and inclusion. For me, it's very simple. It's about being open-minded. So, like Susana, I'm an entrepreneur. I currently have about five companies that we're working with, trying to you know, well, really finding their niches. But they all, and they do very different things. But they all have one thing in common. They all are truly open-minded companies. They embody what I think diversity, equity, and inclusion is, which is a sense of just welcoming anyone, no matter who they are, into the space, and being able to take the best in everyone. I really do believe that oftentimes when we think about, you know, people we might work with, we might judge them without really understanding what they're good at and what they can do. And what I really like to do with DE and I is listen and understand people and know everyone for their individual self, and really bring out the best in people. Because I think all of us, no matter who we are, have something huge to bring to the table and something really important to say. And very simply put, diversity, equity, and inclusion to me is sitting down and listening to those conversations and not judging based on the way someone looks or the way they act or the way they sound, and just being super open. You know, as a blind person living in a sighted world, what I've learned is that, you know, is it a challenge sometimes? Well, yeah, it's definitely a challenge. But the things that people might think of as lifelong problems, the things that make us quote unquote different, are really not what define us. Yeah, my blindness in a sighted world, sure, it's a nuisance. But what my blindness has taught me is just to be super open-minded of people for who they are and what they are and what they do. And we'll get into this. I have a branding company that I really want to chat about a little bit later. But it's all about, you might ask, why does a blind person have a why is a blind person a partner at a branding, visual creative company? And the reason is because we like to build brands that welcome everybody.
Thank you. And with that, very inspiring too as well. And when you're hearing both the Susana stories and Hoby's stories, I bring it to Stephanie Gallo, the biggest wine company in the world. How is a diverse workplace important for you?
It's extremely important. And, I just like to echo what Hoby has said, as well as Susana. Thanks so much for putting this on. I know that this idea was hatched during COVID, and the fact that you were able to pivot and pull this together in such a short period of time is extremely impressive. So thank you. And we're excited to participate. I want to go ahead and just, because there's many folks that are involved in the wine industry participating in this panel, I think the reason that we're passionate about it as a company is that we believe that it's important to constantly endeavor to win new friends for wine. And in order to achieve that, it's very important for us as an industry, as well as our own workforce, that our organization reflects what America looks like today and what America is going to look like tomorrow. We also believe that there's tremendous benefits to having to embracing diversity and inclusion. We believe that a diverse workforce is more productive, it's more innovative. And just like what Susana and Hoby says, it offers a variety of perspectives, and it challenges you to think differently and to solve problems differently. For us to grow the wine industry, we believe that it's extremely important to be empathetic to consumers. And in order to be empathetic to consumers, you have to have a workforce that represents what consumers, who the consumers are and the future consumers. We also believe too that a diverse work organization enables us to solve problems creatively. I love getting a diverse group in to solve a business problem that I think is insurmountable, and just listening to different perspectives, debating the assumptions leads us to a better outcome. I also noticed too that diversity also really boosts employees' engagement as well. So those are just some of the business reasons why we embrace it. But I think that for us to grow as an industry, it's important that we embrace all and to really have our industry reflect what the future consumers are going to look like moving forward.
Thank you, Stephanie. And great insight there, especially coming, with Gallo and being the leader and the largest global wine company. And I bring it over to Bobby Stuckey, who an entrepreneur, a fierce advocate of the Independent Restaurant Coalition. Share with us some of the initiatives that you and your company has done when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Well, first of all, thank you everybody for having me. So honored, and what a great platform. And I feel like I got the short end of the stick going after those last three people because their intros were so awesome. So thank you. I am a big advocate for hospitality, and hospitality doesn't start when you turn the light on for your guests. It starts in your company and how your coworkers work together and how you work with your coworkers. And to do that, you need to be able to work constantly on diversity and making sure you're listening to your employees and having your management team create a culture that can listen to all those different voices out there. And all those different voices, diversity comes in all different walks of life, and you've got to be able to have a hospitality ear for them to make your company richer, better, and more fun. But one of the things that I think is interesting, I think it holds us back sometimes, but it also makes us richer, is at Frasca Hospitality, if you come in to work for us, everyone starts at the same playing field. It doesn't matter on your resume. It doesn't matter where you went to college. It just matters that you want to come in. So if people are committed to staying with the organization, anybody can rise to the top of our organization. Doesn't matter what walk of life or anything, you just have to be part of it. Now, with saying that, that does cause speed bumps, because let's say if you're another organization where you can just hire via a resume, and if you want to reach out and change things quickly, you can. Here, it's like a Johnny Appleseed. You've got to plant those seeds years in advance to get them through the work system to get into an executive or management level. And I look at our executive team, there's only 3 men on the executive team, 2 of them are partners. The rest is a woman-based executive team. But those women have duked it out for so long to go through the company, because you can't just get a resume and move them there.
Leah, thank you, Bobby, by the way. That's important, because, you know, when it comes to retention and how we build people's career paths, especially in the hospitality industry, is important. Leah, would you like to share your thoughts, please, especially in terms of diversity, wine, and spirits?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, just watching this panel, we're all diverse. Everyone is an individual. We have different privileges and different obstacles that each and every one of us have to deal with. And just watching this panel from different countries, different languages, gender, when we think about diversity, I think having this panel discussion and really looking at what diversity means, we have to look at the whole spectrum. You know, and having Stephanie on the panel, when we look at your ERG groups, your employee resource groups for Gallo, it's not just gender, it's not just race, there's a whole spectrum. Because sometimes I think when we think about diversity, we think about gender diversity, or we think about race and ethnicity, but we don't think about accessibility. We don't think about language barriers. We don't think about someone that's, you know, hard of hearing or deaf, or someone that's blind. And as Hoby mentioned, it's really important that we touch base on making our community more accessible, because it's more appealing to diverse people to know that they feel belonged, that they have representation. And again, everyone on the panel today, we have different backgrounds. We come from different parts of the industry. It's not just physical diversity. It's also cognitive diversity. We have different sets of, you know, skills and knowledge. And coming together as a community, this is innovation. This is how we move the needle forward.
Thank you. You know, and for those, I'm sure everyone has seen in the press, you know, Be the Change is an initiative that we want to implement in legislation. And so the next question that I have, which is to help empower hiring practices and education in this business. Susana, I'd love to ask you this question. In serving as a congresswoman, what was some of the key takeaways that you can apply to the private sector, both in general and more specifically to diversity, equity, and inclusion? Because you've had this experience.
I was in silent. I was speaking. Sorry. Thank you, Philana, for making this question. Sorry, I'm alone at my house and it's a problem. I have a bad connection. Okay, being a congresswoman is an experience that we should all pass on. Because we realize that politicians sometimes are more committed to their own future than to the future of the country's citizens. And that is why I resigned as a congresswoman, and I decided to come back to my private practices and to chair the W20, where I should really help to make more diverse and more acceptance in all the equity side of the women's and men's and child's and people with disabilities. Sometimes you have more opportunity to make change in your place where you have more power, becoming a role model changing the practices you have in your company, looking, for instance, to have more flexibility for people to work in the company with disabilities, with women that have the chance to work from their houses in order to be able to take care of the loved ones, or to have the something very important that didn't happen in many places, to have the same salary for the same responsibility. Many times women or people with disability has a lower salary than the other people because they are different. And in that way, I decided to become a role model with my company, and we really work on all these access of the inclusion, and to help people to have a better quality life, and also to advocate to other companies. That I did through the W20 and the Empower organization, advocating to the company to have these practices, to have more women or people with disabilities included in their boards, in their decision, in the best positions to have the influence to the workers. It's very important because there is a lot of inequality, and we need to fight against that from our area of influence. And then we become in something that everybody started to copy. Sorry, because sometimes my English is too poor, and today I have a problem with my mouth, so I'm sorry. But I hope it was clear what I do and what I think we must do all over in order to finish the inequality and to have more inclusion. If not, we are losing more than 50% of the talent in this planet. So we need to include all the people in order to have more equal planet and equal society. Sorry, thank you.
Agreed, absolutely agreed. And speaking again to know Susana, I mean, when you created this path for us, Susana, and gave us, what the work that you have done has been so inspiring to even bring together everyone here today. So thank you so much. And we recognize that, and
thank you.
I think in speaking with also Stephanie, I know, she wants to say, I would love for you to talk about, how is Gallo putting diversity and inclusion into action, especially coming from a global wine leader?
You would think that after 8 months, I would have it under control about taking myself off mute. There's a couple of things that we have done. I think the first, and I'm really pleased to announce this, is that about 3 months ago, we instituted a D&I council. And the purpose of the D&I council is to bring accountability to our D&I initiatives, as well as to really set goals and strategies for D&I within our organization. The second is really around training. We believe that every employee plays an important role in creating diverse and inclusive work environment. And we cannot do this unless our workforce is educated as well as engaged. And fortunately, our employees have shown great enthusiasm and interest around our D&I training initiatives. The third is really around hiring. We are thoughtful about the opportunities for development as well as advancement within Gallo. And we're making a concerted effort to ensure that our interview slates are diverse and representative of our consumers, as I mentioned to you before. And the fourth is really around retention. I think that the ERGs, as Leah has mentioned, has been incredibly important for retention. You can do a tremendous amount of bringing a diverse workforce into the organization. But what we've learned is that once they're within the organization, a considerate amount of thought and care has to be spent around retention. So those are the 4 key areas where we've put action around our DE&I initiatives.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Leah, would you like to say a few words? Because Leah has been so progressive when it comes to DEI and her benchmark reporting. And I'd love for you to comment here as well.
Yes, before I comment on this, I want to say one thing to Susana, because this is a thing in our industry as well. I know that we're all from different countries and we talk about our accents and speaking second languages. And just so everyone knows, part of this initiative is that after this recording is posted on our website, we are going to make sure that it is accessible in terms of getting it transcribed so that we have subtitles, and we're going to have the subtitles in English and Spanish. I think that, again, when we think about diversity, sometimes we overlook and we miss the mark, and we apologize for being who we are, porque español es mi segundo idioma, porque yo necesito practicar más. I need to practice more, but as a
Podemos practicar juntas.
Yes, I'll give you my phone number. But it's really important to embrace who we are and not ever be apologetic, because this is who we are. And we have to let people know, especially in our industry, in the wine industry, in hospitality, the workers and the people that are a part of this community, a lot of people are, English is not their first language, you know? So when we think about accessibility, it is, or diversity, it is so deeply rooted. You know, we really have to go way beyond what we think, again, about gender and race and ethnicity. But going back to our benchmark reporting, part of the job fair initiative, which is really important, that the exhibitors participated. They were asked to do a survey, and this survey will help us to collect aggregate information within the wine industry to see where we are with diversity and inclusion, how we measure, how can we move forward if we don't have actual numbers. Diversity in wine and spirit, we founded it in 2018, and we spent a lot of time thinking and looking at this industry. What are the problems? What are the solutions? But how do we find that out without actually having the time and say, well, what's the data within the wine industry? And I'm like, I don't know. It doesn't exist. And people look at me like I'm crazy. And I'm like, it's because somebody has to get everyone together and say, let's be a part of the change. Let us participate and give this information so collectively we can work together and start looking at what we need to focus on. Are there things that we're not doing, that we're missing? Are we not thinking about language? Are we not thinking about giving confidential surveys to our employees to see what they value in terms of being an employee or being part of a company, and how they feel, belongingness, inclusion? Asking these questions to really make us think, what are we missing? Oh, yeah, we don't have this, we don't have that. That's great. I love that companies have participated in this this initiative, because a lot of companies have asked questions and said, we're not there yet. And you're not supposed to be there yet. This is what this initiative is for. It's to get you there. And I think, you know, for candidates as well, for the job fair, they have a survey that they are welcome and encouraged to fill out, so that companies also know what prospective candidates feel about inclusion, what they value, and what their understanding is about belongingness and diversity. So yeah, again, all the initiatives for the companies that are on board on this discussion, it's very important. What we're doing now is moving forward, and we're moving forward together.
Leah, can I add just one comment to your speech?
Yes.
When we did the research in W20 regarding what means inclusion for companies, you know, it's proven by the research. When you have more diverse task force, you have more women, more disabled people, you have all kind of people, different races, different religions, you have more loyalty in your workers, you have more stability in your workers, you have more revenues in your capital invested, and that is proven. It's proven when you have diversity in your board, in your task force, you have more of everything. So doesn't make reasons to not to be inclusive in your company or in your place. It's very, very important to be inclusive. And sorry, I wanted to add because it's proven for research. What you say is proven for research.
I love it. I think this is such an important conversation. And one of the things that our team at Be the Change, we consistently talk about is, what does true success look like after we launch this wine fair? And the true success really is following the candidate's life after they've been placed in these companies and seeing where they're at a year from now, 2 years from now, and 3 years from now. Did the company that placed them, did they follow their career? Did they mentor them? Were they promoted? Did they feel safe? What are some of the things that were put in place? And then on top of it, true measurement also is the exhibitors and the employers. Did the employers just bring on someone and then did they implement the DEI benchmark report? Did they follow up with what Leah is doing? And also not only about Leah, but also all diverse voices. Have they done that? And that is something where this initiative is so important, because it's all of us that are Be the Change, right? It's not just one group of people. Everybody has to do it together.
But to piggyback, I know we're on time, Philana, but you know how I am. Just to piggyback on that, it's also not up to the employers, it's up to the employees. Because right now, what people need to understand is that we're actually shifting a culture. And we need the contributions of the employees to actually participate and to understand. You know, a lot of employers, they implement diversity and inclusion plans, and if they don't succeed, they ask why. And one of the questions that I have for employers are, well, what do the employees think? Because it's not just up to you, it's up to us as a community to make sure that we're heard and that we're holding everyone accountable. So I just wanted to put that on there. So go ahead, Philana.
Perfect. I think very well said. You know, and this is we're actually going to talk about an important subject matter as well. And this goes over to Bobby. You know, you've been doing a lot to implement change, especially with issues within the Court of Master Sommeliers. And diversity and sexual harassment are facets of a larger conversation regarding DEI initiatives. How can we better prevent and address performative allyship in the workplace, organizations, and our community?
Well, first of all, going back to the Court of Master Sommeliers, the first thing is that should not happen there or in any organization, period, because everything we're talking about is being a safe space. If people can't flourish and grow because they're not safe, then that shouldn't exist, period. That has to be taken off the table immediately. And organizations, doesn't matter if it's a university, if it's a Court of Master Sommelier, or a business, they need to constantly work on their culture. Because if you take the eye off the ball of the culture, things can go bad, go south immediately. And think of a bad culture situation, a bad apple is like a monster outside your window doing push-ups every day, getting stronger. And if you don't find a way as a leader of an organization to get those things out of there, you're always going to be fighting that. I mean, keeping your culture strong and safe is a lot of hard work. It shouldn't be, but it really is, because when you, as an organization grows, I mean, I can't even imagine being the size of Gallo, but even in a restaurant group, when you're up to 200 employees or a university or whatever, when people interview to come into your organization, you see the best of them, but you don't know if they are creating culture problems without you being able to see it. And that's a real dangerous thing. I think we need to really focus on organizations, really, how do I like to say this? Really thinking of the HR department as important as the CFO. You need to have an HR department that people can go to, that they can feel safe, that they can, and that things are getting taken care of when they go to that HR department. I think it's that's to get us to the finish line or to the goal. We've got to make sure there's a safe spaces. I mean, I'll speak very candidly, and I know there's another fellow peer of mine from the Quartermaster Sommeliers on this. I went to them 3 to 4 years ago, I think. I don't know the exact date, but it was over 3 years ago. And I went to the chairman and I said, we need a human resources department here immediately. This is before the sexual harassment. This was just based on me just thinking, man, this thing's grown. You need to make sure everyone feels safe. For an organization to wait 3 years to put an HR department together, unacceptable. You know, all businesses have to find a way to put that into their budget to have that there.
Philana's going to kill me because I'm going to say one thing about what Bobby's going to say. I'm supposed to be quiet, but Bobby.
We want to hear from you. This is
But Bobby, I think what you're saying is important is because, and not to get too extreme, but when we combated terrorism in the US, people always said, if you see something, say something. If there's something that looks suspicious, say something, alert someone. And Bobby, years ago, you brought this to people's attention that this needs to happen. So just to piggyback on what you're saying, if you see that something is happening, it is up to you to say something, you know?
That is so key, Leah. That is so key. Like even in our organization at Frasca Hospitality, you might hear about something, it comes and you find out that one bad apple had been doing something wrong. And it could be sexual harassment, it could be substance abuse, it could be it could be bullying, it could be so many things. But the leadership of an organization can't have their eyes everywhere. And you need, if one of anybody sees something, they should bring that up. That is so key. And I think maybe historically organizations weren't good at giving a safe space for those people to come forward.
Agreed.
You know, and I bring this back to Hoby, you know, and in my conversations with him, as I've been getting to know some of the practices that you have been empowering for inclusive practices in diversity, equity, and inclusion. What are some things that you would like to share, Hoby?
Well, first of all, I just so appreciated what people have said, and to bring it especially back to what Susana said at the beginning of her comments, which is, you know, let's create a better quality of life for everybody. That's really the goal, and that's the point. And for me, you know, hearing what everybody's saying is just really eye-opening. And I guess I can say that as a blind person, but it really is eye-opening for me and mind-opening to think about and understand how people are viewing diversity and inclusion more or less in the workspace, both from an employer and employee standpoint. I take a bit of a broader approach on diversity and inclusion, and I like to think about how can we create diversity, equity, and inclusion for everybody in our lives, for everybody we interact with. So that's not only the people within the company, and I know we're talking about company structure and a little bit of internal DEI concepts because of the job fair, but I just want to remind all of us to think about it in a much broader sense, and think about not only how do your employees feel when they're treated a certain way, but also how do your customers feel? How does everybody sort of interact, and how can we make this world a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive place for all of us? So my work in this area, I'll just say a few words about my sort of introduction and what I did at the very beginning of my graduate career. I got my PhD in chemistry in 2016. And it was when I was finishing up my undergraduate career in chemistry when I realized that, you know, I've been very lucky. I've had great support all along. I've gone to science programs offered by the National Federation of the Blind and other organizations that are just super helpful, you know, national programs. But my goal here is more than that. I really want to make chemistry more accessible to anyone, and really not only chemistry, but science. So I launched Accessible Science back in 2011, which is a nonprofit that held 6 annual chemistry camps from 2011 to 2016 to make science more accessible to blind high school and college students, and really to show them what their true capabilities and opportunities were as they sort of go about their careers. Now, the goal was not for every one of them to be a chemist, of course, at all, because that wouldn't be practical. It was rather just to show people, hey, what are you good at? What can you do? And to show them that maybe there are things beyond what they've been told they can do that they should pursue, no matter how visual they seem. And science, technology, engineering, and math are some of those things. My view of diversity and inclusion is very, very broad, as I've said. I believe in a concept called sensory literacy. Sensory literacy is a concept wherein I think that we should be able to be literate in all of our senses. So you're all visually literate. If I show you something that's red and I say, what color is this? You'll say red, and you know that color from childhood, right? Now, those of us in the wine industry tend to be fairly olfactory or aromatically literate, but when was the last time you were going about your life and you smelled something on the air and you said, oh, I know that, but I can't quite pinpoint it. It's a little bit hard to identify what that aroma is. Happens to all of us. And all I'm saying is that I think we should be more literate in all of our senses, be able to hear things and know what you're hearing, taste things, touch things, and smell them, to really understand them. What I think comes from true sensory literacy, and I pride myself in being able to really be non-visually literate in my other four senses. I really like to think that I am. And what I feel comes with sensory literacy is a true sense of awareness of our surroundings, of what we go through, and of what other people around us are going through. And I think a true sense of awareness fosters incredible inclusivity and equity and diversity. Whether it's your life partner or your business partner or your colleague or whoever it is, or a customer you're interacting with, if you are more aware and you listen better instead of hearing, you're going to be more inclusive of that person. I brought this concept through in my work of sensory literacy through a program that I've developed over the years called Tasting in the Dark, which is a program where we take any number of foods and beverages and have a conversation about them and taste them with everybody under blindfold. Now, the point is not to show people what my life is like by blindfolding them for an hour or a little more than an hour, because that would be silly to think that that would be possible. The goal is to show them a different part of the world and create a different sense of awareness when we're not distracted by our eyesight. So it's really including people who may not have thought about the world the way I do in the way that I approach it. And it's really incredible to me how many people come away saying, wow, that was a different perspective. I can taste wine more fluently. I can understand more about wine. So that's one area where I personally try to bring diversity and inclusion and equity into my work and show it to everybody and allow everybody to think through it and understand it. But as I said before, I'm a partner at a branding company. It's a wonderful, I love the people I work with at Tucker Branding. And we basically build brands in the wine and spirits and beer industry and food and beverage in general. And the reason, why is a blind guy a part of a creative team that does a lot of visual creative? Well, there's a very good reason for it in the way that I see it, in that when we build brands, we need to build them in a very inclusive way. That's everything from how easy is it to open the bottle. Maybe we have someone who's a senior and has arthritis. Guess what? They need to be included just as much as the person who has a different skin color than you. How easy is it to open the bottle? And one of the things that we counsel anyone we work with, and we encourage everybody we work with to do, is just to be, what diversity and inclusion means is to be inclusive of everybody. And I think Bobby thinks a lot about, I know Bobby thinks a lot about this from the hospitality space, but it doesn't matter if someone drives up in a dirty pickup truck wearing old tattered boots and jeans with holes in them and wants to come in and taste your wine or eat at your restaurant, or if it's the person dressed to the nine in the hat and gloves ready to go out on the town in New York City. Everybody needs to be treated with the same level of respect that we would want to be treated ourselves. And to me, that is diversity and inclusion. And man, sorry, I'll get off my soapbox in a minute here, Philana. Diversity and inclusion are not about hiring that one person. Oh yeah, we have a token blind person working for our company. We have a black person working for our company. Therefore, we can check the box. It's not that simple. Diversity and inclusion starts with HR. We've heard this time and time again this morning, but I want to just reiterate how poignant this is, that those who we hire are those who make our space more diverse and those who offer more inclusive and equitable opportunities to those who we serve. So if you think about diversity when you hire and you talk to people and you bring in different perspectives, Stephanie said this very well. Additionally, we are able to solve problems and make decisions in such a wonderfully diverse and inclusive way. So branding is all about diversity. Living our lives is all about diversity. And what I want to encourage everybody on this in this webinar to do is, and this is totally diversity, equity, and inclusion, embrace someone who maybe you wouldn't have embraced normally by saying hello or doing something nice for them. As we're in this holiday season and any time throughout the year, being kind and listening and being understanding is being diverse and being equitable and being inclusive.
Well said, by the way. Can we have a big
So-
round of applause? Mic drop.
Very good.
Why, this is why you're on the panel. What a
Oh,
fantastic,
amazing.
amazing, amazing. You know, I know we don't have a lot of time left, but I do want to allow some time for questions, and I'd like to be able to make sure that we ask a question that just came up on the Q&A. From a capitalist model perspective, for what the function of an HR department is toxic, and trying to address the need for this type of HR culture leads to many dead ends. How do we get the CFO and CEO to embrace that perspective about HR that they don't embrace themselves?
I want to answer that question, but I want to leave it to the rest of the panelists because I don't have a HR department. So if anyone else wants to answer, but as I have a good answer for that, but if anyone wants to take that, Susana, Stephanie, Bobby, Hoby.
What I would comment just very briefly is that it's not about this sort of teaching diversity, equity, and inclusion to these people on leadership teams. It's showing it to them. And I have to say it's about hard work. It's about stepping out as someone who is in a minority population. I would just say it's all about stepping out, breaking the mold, and showing, hey, I am a blind guy in wine, but I can work super hard, and that's why you should embrace people who are different. I am a woman in wine, but I work hard and I make a difference, and that's why we need to embrace these people. So it's not about telling. We can tell people stuff all day. It's about showing them. And frankly, the only way to show people, or the best way to show people, I think, is to work hard and mean business.
Stephanie?
You know, first of all, Hoby, you were awesome. I would love to invite you to come speak to our crew because, well, we'll talk about it either when we have time. We have time after
That's
this.
a huge honor, Stephanie.
You're
Thank you very
awesome.
much.
So thank you so much. We have a lot to learn from you. You know, I saw the question, and I have to say that Michelle Lewis is our Chief Global HR Officer, and she's my partner in crime in this. Like, we are joined at the hip. You know, I think that from a CEO perspective, it starts with setting the tone at the top. And we have our family values that are articulated. They're now our corporate values, and we hold each other accountable to it. And, you know, I think that D&I really is around our corporate value of respect, and our CEO holds everyone accountable to it. And it does start from the top, and it does. I don't think that I could do the job that I'm doing or realize our vision if it wasn't for the partnership that I have with our head of HR.
I agree 100% with you, Stephanie. It's coming from the head.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Philana, I want to input that it's also important for people to understand what diversity hiring is. It's when a company looks around at the table, at their leadership, at their employees, and they see a homogenous environment, everyone that looks like them. And they say, something is wrong here. How come I'm sitting at this table and there's no one else that just doesn't look like me? That's when you know you have a problem. And it's a problem because, like Hoby said, we're all different, but in terms of education and what we bring to the table, we all bring something different. And if you're not attracting diverse talent, it's up to the companies to then say, why is that not the case? Why can't we have diversity? We have a hard time. It's asking that question. And a lot of companies are right now looking at their table, looking at their boards, their leadership committees, their employees, and looking around and saying, why don't we have diversity? Let's do something about it. And then when you think about diversity hiring, it's not checking off a box. It's what did we miss? We don't have diversity because everyone has been homogenous. Everyone has looked like me. So our marketing is all homogenous. Who we and where we do business and conduct business with other organizations, we look at who we are spreading the message to, who we use as a recruiting firm, and we start thinking about other ways to reach other communities that we didn't reach before. Because Hoby, Hoby and I, we met each other this week. I've met another professional. I've met veterans. I've met different diverse professionals in wine that I've never heard about and knew nothing about and didn't even know they existed until I did the work as DWS, Diversity in Wine and Spirits. I said, where are there any transgender winemakers? Because we're not looking around at the table that we're at. If we're not looking and searching for these diverse individuals, we're missing out on these opportunities. But also diverse candidates have to understand that feeling of, hey, I don't see representation and I don't see this. We need to stand up and say, hey, I'm here and I want a job. Or here, I see that there's no representation in your company for XYZ and I'm concerned about it. I don't want to work here, but I want to feel that moving along in 2021, that you're in a place that I feel that I'm going to be included, but I have to say something. Like I said, it's not just up to the employers, it's up to the employees, it's up to the candidates to say something. Because the problem can't be fixed if somebody doesn't know that there's a problem.
Hey, Leah, can I add one thing to what you just said?
Yes, Hoby, go ahead.
So I think that, one thing that's a beautiful thing about being blind is that I don't judge anyone based on color, and I have no idea what the room looks like, and I have no idea, if there are people that look like me or don't look like me. So I think that one thing I would say about, we often judge diversity by how the room looks. Do we have different colors in here? But it is about that. I'm not saying it's not, but it's also about asking the questions and find diverse people based maybe just on experiences that they've had in their lives. Maybe we have someone who really, let's say we're building a winery team and we have someone who has been around a lot of, really understands they've been in the chemical production industry and they really understand sulfur dioxide better than a lot of us. And they happen to be diverse in other ways. Well, that might be a person that we want on our team for what they know. And I'm sorry, that was kind of a silly example that wasn't very well thought through, but it's all about just not only having the look at the table be different, that's important. It's about having the personalities and the value adds from each individual being different. And to remember that it's not, hiring for diversity is not just about being good and being a good Samaritan. I'll leave it to what Stephanie said. It's about hiring for that extra bit of talent that you didn't have on your team, these things that seemed insurmountable. When we bring someone who just thinks a little bit differently than us, AKA diverse from us, man, they get solved in ways we never thought possible.
Thank you so much. And I just have to say, especially from what Leah was saying, I work in wholesale. We know there's a lot of wholesalers on this call today. And you have to have the courage and the kindness to be able to speak to your boss and to your employer and say, everyone else looks the same except for me. And, you know, I think with this initiative, I'm changing. I am changing myself because we want to give everyone the confidence and the courage and the resources to go to your employers and say, hey, you know what? We want to address some of these things that we see that are not right. And it looks like you're checking the block. And I know you mean well, but do you really know how it's affecting me? And so much of that, it also goes in how you work and how you collaborate with suppliers, employers, employees, your friends. So I cannot say how much more, I cannot express enough how much more important it is to have this discussion and to have all of you on here today, because it gives me confidence. It gives me confidence. And I just want to say thank you. I just have to say that. So thank you so much for even highlighting that, Leah. It means a lot. It's very emotional. This entire initiative, it's been an incredible journey. I know we don't have a lot of time left, but I do want to ask one more question, which I think is interesting. And this was one of the first ones, is how do you measure diversity, equity, inclusion? If tokenism is dangerous, how can companies truly measure and do the work needed for true inclusion? Anyone like to answer that question?
It's a great question. It's a really great question. It's a really fantastic question. And I think it's a very difficult one. To me, it's measured in terms of a few different variables. 3. Number 1, do you think about it? It's about how present is it in your mind as a company leader? I think that's one really good measurement. If you're thinking about it and you're considering it, and you're not just doing something because you feel like you have to, but you're doing it from right here from the heart because you know it's right and you want to, that's number 1. I think that's a first place in how we measure it. Number 2, do the people around you have different abilities? Do they have different ways of thinking about problems and ways of solving problems? Do you feel like you can call on someone who thinks differently than you when you have trouble, when you have a situation? That's diversity, and I think that measures it. If you have tons of different people you can call on, I think that's great. And number 3, do you have people who just view the world maybe look different than you do? Like what is that sort of gauge of, are you making sure to hire both the best people and the right people for the job?
I'd also like to comment on that. I'll piggyback on that, Hoby. What I will say is that, again, this goes back to the looking around. And when we talk about tokenism for me is when you get called out and someone says you don't have diversity here, you don't have diversity there, and someone hurries up and hires somebody that's a minority or part of the spectrum right away. They hire them. When Black Lives Matter happened, when we all witnessed George Floyd, so many companies reached out to me, and I was asked to be on a couple of boards. One of the boards in particular, I asked, why do you want me on your board? And they gave me a specific reason: because you do diversity and inclusion. I see that I'm frozen. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. It's because you do diversity and inclusion. The board was homogenous. I didn't see diversity. And I had to ask who I was, how I value myself as a professional, where I am in my career. Do I belong here? And so if you're going to think about tokenism, you have to ask yourself, as the person that, hey, we have to do diversity, I'm checking off a box. Are those people qualified? And that's why we have this job fair, because there are a lot of diverse, qualified candidates all over this country, especially after COVID-19, especially what's going on with the restaurant industry. People have lost their jobs. We have a lot of people that are diverse, that are educated, that can learn quickly and can pivot to different industries. And this is that meeting place. This is the opportunity where you can say, hey, I'm here, I'm ready to work, I'm ready to learn, and I value myself and who I am, and I'm qualified for this position. But it's also an opportunity for employers to understand, we've lived and been in this wine industry for years, and it's been homogenous. And if we don't have leaders like, for example, Julia Coney, who's a black female wine writer, I have never seen so many black writers in wine in my life. And she made that happen because she had representation. Someone saw someone that looked like her and said, I can do that. And she encouraged them. And she explained how to write and where you can go get mentored. So when companies come to be the change, a lot of companies said, well, we don't really have a lot of jobs available. And I said, well, that's great, because this is a time not to use this just as a job fair and to tick off a box, but to do mentorship, internship, explain what the 3-tier system is, explain how our industry works, because we have not had access to the information that people with privilege, people that have been in this industry understand and have known. Use this up as an opportunity to say, hey, you know what? I don't want to take off the box. I want to prepare you for our job fair in March. I want you to think about your goals and where you want to be. Think about yourself and make sure, you don't want to be a token. You don't want to just get a job. You want to be in this industry and you want to contribute because you are valuable. I'm valuable and everyone on this panel is valuable, and we all had our different struggles and challenges, and here we are. We all have to be part of the change.
Thank you for that.
Bobby's like,
there's a great question as well that just came through, because I want to talk about the transgender community. And I think this is an interesting question that I would love to ask. As a trans immigrant in this country who did not have a work permit for a longer time and did years of volunteer community organizing and now eligible for work, oftentimes I was rejected for not having office environment experience. What are the steps a hiring committee need to take, and how can I present myself better?
No,
The next question.
I missed part of the question. So is the person trying to get into an office environment and doesn't have that background?
Yes, so as a trans immigrant in this country who did not have a work permit for a longer time and had done years of volunteer community organizing and now eligible for work, often at times I was rejected for not having office environment experience. The steps in the hiring committee from the other employer need to take, and how can I present myself better?
I think that's a very interesting question. I think it has to go with what Leah was saying around transferable skill sets. I don't know what job you were trying to apply for in an office environment, but often what I love is when candidates are able to speak to how the experience that they had outside the wine industry or outside the industry, and how that is transferable to the current job that they're applying for, whether it's an office job or not. And this is a very simple example, but I was talking to someone who was actually a teacher in a classroom environment, and she wanted to transfer into a sales job. I spent time with her on working on how being a teacher in a classroom, quite candidly, you've developed a tremendous amount of skills around communication, around dealing with crazy parents, educating people, how those skills can be transferable to a sales environment. So, I think the best advice that I can give is what we use this expression, link and leverage, link your experience in your outside to what the job that you're applying for is.
And also, I'm not sure that was a clear question. Stephanie's answering a part of the question, but if you're saying that part of you feel that you haven't gotten the experience or you can't get into that space has been because you're transgender, that's also something that, again, Be the Change, the virtual job fair and the survey that we've given to exhibitors, we're asking questions so that these questions can be asked within your HR team. Do you have bathrooms, for example, that if you're transitioning, people feel comfortable entering in those spaces? You know, are we thinking about pronouns? And even Be the Change, this whole experience, we're still learning. This is our first virtual job fair. Philana swears we're not in the virtual job fair space, but here we are. But these are questions that we had in the survey, not to call anyone out, but to start thinking about questions that we don't think about. We don't think about accessibility in terms of bathrooms or how you should be addressed. So if the question is more transitioning to a different job space than you've been in versus my challenges of getting into a job space because of how I look and who I am and what's going on in my life. Again, we're just starting out, and these the exhibitors that are part of this initiative as they're asked these questions so that we can move forward to make it a more safe space, have their HR department think about these questions, and say as a company, you know, do we need to think about pronouns and asking sensitivity to the transgender community, how we address and how we approach our transgender employees. So those are two different, so I'm not sure what the question was because again, we answered it from two different perspectives. I hope that was helpful.
And one thing I may say to, look, you do have a great skill set, and if you've been in the restaurant industry, it seems like I didn't get that piece, but there's a lot of transferable skill sets that you have. Kind of just meditate on those and get those on the resume. And if you get the interview, really let that be known. I think if it's an office space if there's office jobs that you want, I mean, I think there's so many great office jobs that people coming from the restaurant business can be, we're a flexible group. We know how to do different things. So if you're looking for one of those office jobs and you want to leave the restaurant industry, you've got skill sets, be proud of them and use them.
Thank you, Bobby. We have another question, and I'm going to bring this over to Leah because I know she talks about this, especially with their DI benchmark, is ageism. What about age diversity, especially for workers and employers and candidates over 50?
It's a good question. I feel like I'm plugging the job fair so much now, but one of our exhibitors, when we were talking about jobs and internships, I asked, what's your oldest applicant for your internships? Because when we think about that, we think about college students, people that are coming into this industry. Now, during this pandemic, we have to think about people also transitioning to different positions. So maybe you can't just hop over into another job because you have a different skill set. Internship opportunities, volunteering, and getting certain experience right now and building on that is so important. It is very important. But again, I will say these are questions that we've asked in the survey for us to start thinking about. Right now, this initiative is a start. We have so much more work to do. This is not a sprint, it's a marathon. If we want to talk about ageism, I know, Bobby, you constantly say this, and I think you're young. So, I would like to hear what you have to say about that, because it's so important.
Well, I think we're in an interesting point now, culturally, because we have a lot of young people that are in the restaurant industry, at least in management and stuff. And there's a whole culture that doesn't really love older people. They don't think that they bring a great skill set. I've had that brought up to me. I've listened to people that are like, oh, what do you bring? It's interesting. Outside of the wine world, my brother is a screenwriter. And if you're in Hollywood, you're scared to death to put your age as a screenwriter anywhere near you, because that industry just eats that up. That's probably the most ageist industry out there. Screenwriting should have nothing to do with your age. You're writing material. But my brother and I were just talking about it on a run on Sunday. But really, I think we need to realize, just as people who are diverse bring different skill sets, people with life experience bring different skills.
Absolutely.
And it has to be embraced. And look, I've been in the restaurant industry for a long time, and I'll be I gave a talk about this, is hospitality is how you talk to everybody from different generations. A sociological generation is between 7 and 10 years. So if you look at the socio generations, if you look at baby boomers versus, like, I'm 51 years old, I'm right behind the baby boomers. We were much closer to what we considered important versus Z generation or people in their 20s. What they think of as important is completely different than someone who's 50 years old. They're really different ideas, and we have to embrace all those ideas. I think it's something that is a big elephant in the room. No one really wants to talk about, is that if you're a 30-year-old manager and you're managing someone who's 55 years old, they see the world differently. There's nothing wrong with that. You have to have the hospitality gene to understand that. I look back at when I was a young manager at the Little Nell 25 years ago, I had it a lot easier than a young manager does now. Because if I looked at being 25 years old, managing people up to 50, that was a similar sociological group. Then right now there's so much diversity between a 30-year-old and a 50-year-old. And we've got to respect these different sociological generations and bring them in and make them feel comfortable.
I would say that, you know, from just my perspective, I embrace, when you said 50, I started to panic because I'm soon going to be in that age demographic. But I can just think, particularly when I first started my career, I benefited tremendously from folks within our company that were 60 and even 70 years old, whether it was the winemakers, our first, you know, female VP. There was just the wisdom, the perspective she gave me, the mentoring and the coaching was invaluable. And you know, I think that the life experience is just, it's invaluable. So I have a heart for this. It's something that I know that for my own personal development has been very beneficial. And I think there was a question, you know, I don't know if it was the same individual that I asked earlier on the session, you know, should I be worried about putting dates on my resume? I personally, not having dates makes me nervous, but seeing dates, it helps me at least understand what the story is. So I say leave it on. Yeah.
And I think Stephanie and I don't know how old Stephanie is. I'm 51.
I'm 48.
Oh, we're calling people's ages out right now? Is that what we're doing?
None of you look a day over 20.
I think that's awesome, by the way, I'm 44.
You know, but I do want to say this so everyone knows. Our generation loved mentorship. We
absolutely
loved people older. I mean, I think about my mentors. I'm still very close to them. Certain generations don't love the older generation, and that you just have to be fine with that and talk about that and say, this is what it is.
But also part of this job, again, shameless plug, but it is a Be the Change job fair. We ask about reverse mentorship, but what is reverse mentorship, right? The concept is your employees or, you know, someone under you is teaching someone that's in a position above you. But that also works with age. Believe it or not, one of my mentors is way younger than me, and I'm 40 under 40, so we're clear. But I look at her and I'm like, man, I thought I was young, and the way she thinks about wine and marketing. And that generation and being an Instagram influencer, I'm the worst at Instagram. If you've gone on my Instagram, I'm terrible at it. I'm not into social media. I'm kind of like at this cusp. But when I see how she deals with wine and how she approaches wine, I'm like, man, that is not my experience. And I've been in the hospitality industry for 20 plus years. And we've come so long. We've come so far from where we are now. There weren't any awards given to James Beard or wine enthusiasts. We've come so far to see people like me getting awards and getting recognition. So when now my last experience at a restaurant was with the Nomad Make It Nice Nomad restaurant, and it was so diverse. And I was in the kitchen, and the kitchen was 90% women. I'm like, never. And they weren't baking, they weren't pastry chefs, they were on the line. And you didn't see that. Bobby, you can attest to that. That wasn't something that you saw a decade ago.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, I do have a weird culinary life, because I was one of the few people as a busboy in the early 80s that I thought all chefs were women. My first chef I worked for was a woman in 1983. My second one in 1985, she was a woman. I still talk to her. I just talked to her 2 days ago. So I had this, and then my first food and beverage director at a hotel, and I'm still close to her, was a woman. So I have a very weird niche, but I totally get it. It's not everyone had that opportunity. And
Bobby, you know, I'm gonna have to call you out because we have to talk about intersectionality. I think when we talk about women, we're talking about all spectrums of women, right? So are we talking about Asian, Black, women of color, or are we talking about white women? This is very important, Bobby.
well, all, like our executive chef at Frasca is a Korean woman.
No, I mean years ago, a decade ago.
Oh, yeah. One was white, one was a Latina. One was Latina, one was white, and then the F&B director was Caucasian.
Okay, well, Bobby's he's the exception to the rule. Bobby knows what.
As I said, like, it took me until I was like 30 to realize that wasn't the norm, because it's just the environments I was in.
But now you see that times. I think that the big is that times are shifting. We're changing.
Yeah.
It's different trends. So when we think about ageism, I think we have to look at it on both ends. I think when I was younger, I wanted, and still to this day, I want people to respect me. And sometimes people are like, Leah, I'm older than you. And I have, like, you might be older than me, but I have this experience in this field. So what are we talking about here? And I want to respect people that have, you know, more knowledge than I do and have been in this industry. I think it works both ways. I think we can learn from each other. Older people can learn from younger people. Younger people can learn from older people.
Yeah, the only one quick thing that I would add to that is that I think we all just need, as I said before, DEI is all about open-mindedness. Doesn't really matter who you learn from, but like Leah said, we can learn from everybody. And for the record, people who are older than you have more life experience and have a little more to share. And I think I have mentors. I tend to have more older mentors and younger mentors, but we just need to appreciate everybody for who they are, regardless of what their age is. And for the record, none of you look a day over 20.
Oh, I love you.
Funny.
You know, there's one question that came to mind that I want to make sure that we ask, and I know we're gonna wrap it up here soon, but I think this is a great question too. In trying to bridge this gap in a small organization, how would you explain the concept of safe and safety to folks who only see it in terms of physical danger and not in terms of the culture? Rania, I believe, does our co-founder Rania want to answer that question?
Philana, for me, can you just repeat that? My internet, you know, I'm in Belize. I'm sorry.
That's okay. In trying to bridge this gap in a small organization, how would you explain the concept of safe and safety to folks who only see it in terms of physical danger and not in terms of the culture?
Well, can I take a stab at that? I think safety is everything. Safety is not just, I mean, look, physical, that has to be addressed, but there's so many subconscious things that might not feel safe. And as your companies grow, you have to make sure that the leadership teams know how important those things are. So the person asked the question, in a small organization, yes, you need to be able to address, if the smaller it is, the less people you have to address it to, but the more early on you need to address it, because you have a smaller pool of leadership. You need to say, hey, this doesn't feel, not safe physical wise, but safe culturally, or safe just mental wise. You need to just say, hey, this isn't great. And don't be worried about doing it. Just go for it, because people just need to learn. Everyone has a different background. Everyone has a different culture. We need to let the people, if they're making a mistake, know, just like any other task.
I would say, you know, on this topic, I had a colleague who came to me and explained, who just was vulnerable, and explained to me how she was feeling, and it was invaluable to me. It really opened up my perspective, and I think it actually helped the situation. So again, you talk about reverse mentorship. I remember the exact moment as to why this individual didn't feel comfortable in a certain situation, and she was vulnerable enough to take the time to share with me how she was feeling.
I also would comment on that employers should encourage everybody at their company to speak up. Don't let people, you know, make sure that that's part of the company culture. A great way to bring cultural safety in is to say, if there's something that doesn't feel right, that I am not seeing, you need to tell me, and just allow that open door.
Also, you know, again, diversity in wine and spirits. I started this organization years ago because I wanted to create a safe space. I, even as a leader to this day, continue to be marginalized. I, even as a leader to this day, have come forward and have talked to peers. And it's a very scary moment to be vulnerable and tell someone how you feel, how they made you feel, what you feel about what's going on in this environment. I, even to this day, have to do this as a leader. But DWS, we're actually rebranding to diversity in food and beverage. I want people to know as employers or employees, people that are part of organizations, if you have an issue and you need to talk to someone and you need to figure out what the right course of action is, this is why we exist. We advocate, we're here, we want to hear you, and we're here to listen. So I would say every case is a different circumstance, a different case by case situation, but I exist, we're here, and there's other organizations that exist as well that can help, and we're happy to connect you to those organizations as well, so that you feel safe, so that you know that you're not alone when you go to someone and you put your vulnerabilities out here. Because again, this initiative is not performative. We want to make safe spaces.
Thank you, Leah. And with that, you know, I want to, first of all, this discussion, and I think I'm so proud, was meant to set the stage for tomorrow. So I'm having our partners and our Be the Change team members actually show their video. So Rania Zayat from Wonder Woman of Wine, Carol Stone, Julie Fabricant with Force Brands, who's been a phenomenal, just a great sponsor. We also had, I know in the beginning, there was a guy named Joe Matar with the headphones on. He was from Brazen and the Opportunity Fund that made this, that really kicked off this initiative and really helped us. And so we want to make sure to say thank you to everyone and give everyone a chance to meet us, and that all of us, everyone on this panel, all the participants, the exhibitors, the mentorship, we are all Be the Change. And we are so excited to have you join us tomorrow for the first virtual wine job fair focused on diversity, equity, inclusion. And there will be more as of next year, 2021. So we are not going to stop anytime soon. And this is just the beginning. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Reach out, get in touch.
Join us. Thank you.
You.